Hello, everybody. Thanks for coming today. We have a really special program and the kickoff to our summer concert series. Just let's thank a few people first. Of course, Elder Services for the beautiful meal they're going to serve. QCC for the cultural meal. Many of you ordered that today. We had an anonymous donor for the beautiful centerpieces, so thank you so much to the anonymous donor. And all of the Worcester Senior Center staff. You must know that putting on these programs is quite an undertaking, and it's a team here, and everybody helps to make sure that all our seniors are happy. And thank you, Jim Crochier. He does all the technology. If you ever need help with technology, please contact Jim. He is phenomenal. So today we have our distinguished speaker. His name is Michael Kaplan. He is also a very dear friend of mine. Him and his wife, Rose, who you might remember Rose, she came and did a whole piece on Barbie, and Rose collects Barbies, plus other things. Rose has about 10,000 Barbies. And Mike collects bikes and antique cars. So you're going to see Mike again at the Worcester Senior Center Car Show, which will be Wednesday, August 7th. Mike Kaplan has been involved with classic bicycles since 1959, when at the age of 7, he asked his parents to get him a Schwinn Black Phantom bicycle. He has been involved in every aspect of the bicycle world, from sales, service, parts, and accessories, to distribution and manufacturing of complete bicycle and parts and accessories. Mike has been on television several times as a noted expert on Chronicle and the CBS Early Show. He has also published articles in Antique Trader, New England Journal of Antiques and Collectibles, Garage Sale Gold, Toy Values Monthly, Toy Box Magazine, and Vermont Antique Times. Wow. Mike has had his phone hooked in with 3 toll-free 800 numbers that spell the word B-I-K-E since 1980, and the email address coololdbikes@aol.com since 1989, and coololdbikes@gmail.com since 2005. Welcome, distinguished speaker today, Michael Kaplan.
Thank you. First, I'd like to thank the sponsors today: Fallon Healthcare, Harmony Place, and Regal Care for helping to make this happen. I also have to thank Jonathan Wick, who helped me get all the bicycles here, starting at 5:30 this morning to get ready so we didn't damage them. The Huffy radio bike that you'll see over there, I've owned it for 44 years, and this is probably one of the first times it's been out and about. It's quite valuable. I turned down $10,000 for it a couple of years ago. Anyhow, let me get started with this. Oh, and Suki Lapin for making this happen. She is wonderful, and that's just an estimate. In the last 30 years or so, collecting has literally exploded with the force of an atomic bomb. Antiques Roadshow episodes, American Pickers, Pawn Stars on television, and in the print media, Coville's Collectibles, articles and coverage by local newspapers and magazines has spawned new categories, subcategories, and niches that are popping up seemingly from nowhere. From cereal box art to fast food collectibles and non-sports cards, trying to keep up with it all is a big challenge, but also great fun. Imagine how boring the world of collecting would be if it was so homogenized that there was only one category, one style, or one format. No thanks. I like it all. The first incarnation of a two-wheeled apparatus had no pedals and was called a Draisine, named after Baron Karl von Drais. The evolution of the modern bicycle began when German inventor Karl von Drais unveiled his velocipede in 1817. It was basically just a log with two wheels, and he strided and like pushed along, and it was kind of humorous, really. After Carl von Drees, the word bicycle was coined when bicycles started becoming equipped with front wheels and pedals on them around 1867. Less than 25 years later, the bicycle found its present form with a chain driving the rear wheel, the so-called safety bicycle, because the high-wheeler bikes that you'll see there, they weren't very safe. It was really easy to go. It's called a header. Okay. When the bicycle first came into popularity, they were called high-wheel bicycles, as you see. They were also known as penny farthings or ordinaries. Okay, that's the standard garb for a high-wheel bicycle rider at the time. The reason they had a large front wheel and a much smaller rear wheel was because they weren't geared, and they needed that giant front wheel to give them propulsion and momentum with each revolution of the tire. But most people don't know this. The giant front wheel was also to put the rider at the same height as someone on horseback, since this was before the automobile and bicycles and horses competed for the same early roadways. The first penny farthing was invented in 1871 by British engineer James Starley. Now in the US, Colonel Alexander Pope saw one over in England at an exposition, and he came back and started the Columbia Manufacturing Company in 1877, making high-wheel bikes in Torrington, Connecticut in an old sewing machine factory that was converted to make bicycles instead. The Schwinn Bicycle Company, which was started in 1895 by a German immigrant Ignaz Schwinn, was Columbia's biggest competitor after its inception. But bicycles were being made everywhere by now. Suddenly, every blacksmith shop in the country was constructing bikes, and there were literally thousands and thousands of manufacturers across America. Some of them weren't very safe either. Bicycle-related items were offered everywhere, from cups to spoons to bells to clothing. If you look in a 1904 Sears catalog, there are dozens and dozens of pages of bicycle-related items featured. Speaking of Sears, at that time, the Sears Roebuck Company was the biggest retailer of bicycles in the world next to Schwinn. And Sears sold a bicycle line called Elgin Bicycles, and Schwinn sold a bike line called Schwinn. But the Elgin bikes were made for Sears primarily by Columbia Manufacturing, who at this point had relocated into a 550,000 square foot facility in Westfield, Mass, where they remained until a series of very poor management decisions caused them to cease production in 2005. I know all about this because I was the distributor for Columbia for 18 years, and I watched them do some really lame things. But I'm not here to talk about bad business management. I'm here to talk about bicycles. But one last thing about business management. The Schwinn Bicycle Company, in one of the most colossal blunders in the history of the bicycle, decided they were not going to make mountain bikes because the third generation Schwinn at the helm of the company deemed them a fad like the hula hoop. When he realized the enormity of his bad call, it was too little, too late. And Trek, Specialized, Giant, KHS, and others had left Schwinn in the dust, leading to the first of their bankruptcies. But again, I'm here to talk about bikes, not bad business. So, the social history of the bicycle is very fascinating. Ladies' bikes were made with no top bar. Oh, this is a treadle bike. This was a variation. They worked almost like a sewing machine, which was interesting because a lot of the original tooling and manufacturing of these came from sewing machine facilities. You treadled on it, and it was a very interesting bicycle. I had one of these that I bought in Syracuse, New York for $3,000 in 1977, and then in 1993 I sold it for $13,000 with no tires on it, in pretty bad disrepair, but that just shows you how rare they are. Ladies' bikes were made with no top bar, and they were step-through frames since it was thought quite unladylike to swing their leg up in the air to mount the bicycle. Here's some more wheelmen riding around. That's kind of a girl's frame, but that's the beginning of the hard tire safety, which both wheels were the same size. There's another hard tire safety, and another hard tire safety, and another hard tire safety. Notice the lamp on the front. They ran different kinds of kerosene lamps and oil lamps. There's some examples of oil lamps. I think this is from the Sears catalog. And if you look at the prices, they were $1.99, $1, $2.95. They were very reasonable, but it was still a lot of money back then. That's a very ornate one. So here's some early bikes from the 1900s. You've got a tricycle. There's a lady's bike you see on the left in the middle. Oh, here are some turn-of-the-century bike accessories. The tandem bikes had the ladies' frame in the front with no top bar and the men's frame in the back. But if you see from the front, above the front wheel to the back set of handlebars, there's a little rod, and what that is, it had rear steering. And they did this because social mores at the time were not going to allow the woman to determine the direction of the bike. Hence, the man could steer from behind with the rear steer setup and control the path taken. This was very, very sexist, to say the least. But we have to remember that this was the mindset before women fought for and finally won the right to vote 124 years ago. Early on in the 20th century, all the bicycles looked very similar. They were very plain and had very little variation because their design was dictated by function. The biggest stylistic differences were in the ornamentation of the artwork on the head badges. There's some head badges from one company, Monarch Silver King, which I'll get into in a little bit. But by and large, the aesthetics of the overall bicycle was constrained by austerity. Then in 1933, well, there's a Silver King. This is an aluminum bicycle. I have one back there along the wall. It has a toolbox saddle, which you see on top, the deluxe Troxel saddle. And that has, like by means of galoshes, you can open it and put your wrenches or various sundries with you, or even a spare tube. Schwinn introduced the super balloon tire in 1933. It changed the whole world of bicycling. It made bikes more comfortable, gave them a much bouncier ride, and took the bumps out of the road. Now not only was ride comfort and performance substantially upgraded, but appearance was improved as well. The frames, forks, seats, handlebars, and sheet metal quickly followed suit. Styling became all the rage, and streamlining became all the style. Aircraft, automotive, and motorcycle styling were combined to create new, flashy models that would lock up market shares with kids who wanted to be just like Dad, and with dads who wanted to ride things of beauty. This is the 1934 Schwinn Streamline Aerocycle. That's a one-piece pressed steel tank with the horn and headlight. Well, the headlight's built in, the horn is up above with a little button. Anyhow, what ended up happening was all the bike companies started making flashy new models that would lock up market shares with kids. All the other manufacturers jumped in. Shelby had the Speedline Air, Dayton had the Dayton Streamliner, and then Columbia manufactured a bike called the Elgin Bluebird. This is the Elgin Bluebird. It was billed as the bike of the century. I think what happened was, since Sears, who sold the Elgin, and Schwinn were so heavily in competition with each other, what ended up happening was, when Schwinn came out with this and called it the Streamline Aerocycle, the very next year Elgin made this bike, and they said, you know, you call that streamlined, and you can see how streamlined this really is. I think there's another shot of it. That doesn't even fit over a tube. That is the frame, and it sweeps all the way to the back wheel. And there's a illuminated automotive type speedometer built into the top of the tank. Also, you'll notice the seat has horizontal springs, like leaf springs, like on a car, rather than the regular coil springs that bikes had prior to that. This bike was called the Bike of the Century, and at nearly $50 in 1935, it offered terms of $5 a day and $5 a month to make it seem affordable. Today, along with the Schwinn Aerocycle, it remains as one of the holy grail pieces that any bike collector would love to find. However, most of these bikes ended up being scrapped and turned into tanks and jeeps for World War II, and since there were very few made to begin with, due to the huge price in a post-Depression economy, the majority of these beautiful streamlined bicycles were lost forever. Monarch Silver King, which was a battery company in Chicago, started making a line of aluminum bikes called Silver Kings. They came out in the early 30s. I have one here. It's a 1934. It's very streamlined. They were very Art Deco, and they featured locking steering to compete with the Schwinn Cycle Lock, ostensibly to thwart theft, but I don't know. You could just pick up the thing and run away with it. They also offered the cool saddle I mentioned that has like galoshes. Later on, if you take a look at that bike, you'll see the way the seat hinges down. Around the country, aluminum bikes were sold by Montgomery Ward's department store under the name Ward's Hawthorne, but they were all made by Monarch in Chicago and privately labeled for individual outfits. New features, new beauty, new style, and sales appeal were the buzzwords of the day, and all the bike manufacturers clamored to outdo each other with ever-increasing dosages of glamour, dazzle, chrome, and more chrome. After a brief return to drabness during World War II, they went all out to capture the hearts, eyes, and minds of the 76,500,000 babies born in America between 1946 and 1964. Murray Ohio Art employed the imagery of a jet fighter with their Jet Flash model to entice would-be Blue Angels. Shelby had the Flyer and the Airflow. J.C. Higgins, which had replaced Elgin as the line sold at Sears, had Color Flow models, Jet Flow models. They had a popular Batwing headlight option, which broke off the first time the kid set the bike down on its side, early precursor to planned obsolescence. By 1950, the venerable bicycle had become an expression of style and class, rivaled only by the automobiles that they so blatantly mimicked. Today, collector cars and collector bicycles coexist as highly prized milestones, often cohabiting the same garages, game rooms, and collections. I should know this because my bicycle museum, which has about 300 bicycles, is directly above my garage that has 20 antique cars. In real estate, there's a saying, location, location, location. With antiques and collectibles, it would have to be condition, condition, condition. These bikes are fun to search for and fun to ride and display, and they can be worth substantial amounts of money, as I've told you, the offers I've had that I've turned down. But before you quit your job and go scouring the countryside, scooping up every rusty bicycle carcass with dreams of early retirement, it's very important to remember that condition is key. Many collectors will confess that their first 10 to 100 purchases should never ever have been made. They were in fact by infectious impulsivity and a lack of knowledge and refinement. They bought anything and everything they could find in the euphoric giddiness of the chase, the bug, so to speak. Fortunately, these initial blind purchases can be written off as a tuition for a relatively inexpensive education and can prove to underscore one of my favorite expressions. If you think education's expensive, try ignorance. The fact that more than 100 million balloon tire bikes were produced, and most made prior to planned obsolescence, provides plenty of opportunities to find good or better examples and correct the earlier uninformed choices. However, unless you own or have access to an auto body shop, It's wise to be a stickler for condition. Are all the parts there? Is it twisted, corroded, or Mickey Mouse? Often passing on the bike is the better part of valor, unless you have a willing buyer waiting in the wings for that bike in the condition found. It can also be worth it, though, to accumulate desirable bike parts to strip and create an inventory. If and when that special bike does pop up, it can be made whole again with parts on hand. Now again, back to the social mores. Girls' bikes tend to have less than half the value of similarly equipped boys' bikes. A big part of this is that they turn up in better condition all the time, and therefore they're less rare. And this is mostly due to the fact that girls took better care of their belongings. They weren't seeing how far their bike could travel with no one on board, like most of the boys were doing in the 50s and 60s. Sometimes the parts on girls' bikes are interchangeable, so it's worth grabbing, and it's also a great way to put together matched pairs of boys and girls' bikes to involve a significant other in your hobby and passion. While there are certain universal standards, desirability really depends on the individual collector. The Schwinn Black Phantom, which was made from 1949 to 59, has proven to be one of the most popular, memorable, and enduring models of all times. It sold for $75 to $105 and was out of reach for most kids when their parents could buy a bicycle for as little as $17. Available in black or red or green for $5 extra, it could be a different color, but few and far between were the parents who would add an extra $5 to a $100 bicycle that was already premium priced. Schwinn took advantage of the exclusivity of the mark with their ads that played up on the "It's swell, it's a Schwinn." Columbia, officially known as Westfield Manufacturing, was now in Westfield, Mass. They made bicycles for Western Auto under the name Western Flyer and produced bikes for many hardware and department stores. Schwinn, Shelby, Colson, and Columbia and others produced private label bikes that beckoned to little kids at the Firestone and B.F. Goodrich tire stores. While Dad was getting tires for the car, the kids were getting outfitted with bikes. Names such as B.F. Goodrich Highway Patrol, Firestone, Police Bike, they played off the popularity of television shows, and the intrigue of pint-sized patrolmen on their make-believe motorbikes helped to pump sales. Having tire stores that already made tires for these bicycles, offering bicycles branded with their own name, was a logical marketing extension and boosted the total units produced by Schwinn, Monarch, Cleveland Welding, and Columbia. Speaking of marketing, in 1949, the Shelby Bicycle Company of Elyria, Ohio, offered a Donald Duck bicycle, which I brought one of today, complete with illuminated eyes and a horn that went quack, 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 in 20-inch, 24-inch, and 26-inch boys and girls models. Around this time, 1949, 1950, 51, the D.P. Harris Rollfast Company produced Hopalong Cassidy bicycles in the same three sizes and genders, but they added fringed leather look, carrier rack, horsehair hide. They came with little Hopalong Cassidy cap guns that fit in the holsters. They also made a Gene Autry bike that had a horse head in the front. Then later in the 50s, Huffy, with rock and roll in full swing, Huffy Bicycle Company came up with a new twist. You know, Chubby Checker, the twist? They put a radio, a tube radio, into their bicycle. It's aptly called the Huffy Radio Bike. Speaker built right into the tank. It also had a little key. I think mine has the key sitting by the handle, so you could lock the radio so other people didn't wear out your battery while you were at recess. Huffy began life as the Davis Sewing Machine Company in New York, and then became the Dayton Company of Dayton, Ohio, which transitioned to the Dayton Huffman Company, and then Huffman, and then just plain Huffy. They pioneered full suspension bikes in 1937. There it is. This is a 1937 Firestone Fleetwood Dayton Huffman Twin Flex. What a mouthful. Anyway, They had a lot of problems with this bicycle. It began to be called the Huffy Death Bike because some kids got killed on them. They didn't know what they were doing with the full suspension. The pivot points had issues. But after some tragedies, they re-engineered it, and soon it was reintroduced as other companies joined suit with twin suspension bikes. They were billing it as new and unique, but it's kind of ironic that in the late 1800s, the Pierce company, which later started making Pierce Arrow automobiles, had a full suspension bike. What was old becomes new again. It happens all the time. Then in the early 60s, bicycles appeared that sported rocket ship graphics and names to match. Flying Star, Flightliner, Jetliner, Spaceliner, and Spacelander were just a few. These bikes played on America's preoccupation with space and space travel. With the exception of the Bowden Spacelander, and you'll see there's a Bowden Spacelander placemat in front of every one of you that I put there. That's the original sales poster for the 1959 Bowden Spacelander. The other 60s bicycles turn up frequently, but the Bowden Spacelander that's on your little placemat there, they never show up because only 522 were ever made. In 1985, there were 28 examples known in the entire world, and I and a friend of mine, a bike collector, we tracked down the original inventor, Ben Bowden, and we talked him into letting us purchase the rights and trademarks and be licensed, authorized, and endorsed by him to bring the bicycle back after it lay dormant for 25 years. This guy, Ben Bowden, was so excited, he hugged me. I didn't think he was going to let go. This was his dream bike, and it was a nightmare for him. He designed it in 1946 for the Britain Can Make It Science Fair. That's the original design. This wasn't a real bike. It was composition. And those front hubs and rear hubs were dynamos to store energy when you went down a hill, and then that energy would propel you up the hill. Never happened. It was just an idea on paper, and this bike, you couldn't even pedal it. It was just a static display at an exhibition. The history with him was he designed it in 1946, and then after a failed calamitous attempt to make them in Africa, where Mr. Bowden lost 840,000 British pounds sterling in 1951, which was 2.4 million 1951 dollars. He was devastated. It was going to be made, he called it aluminium. I guess that's how the Brits call aluminum. He had been involved with the Healy Silverstone race car, the Tucker automobile, only 48 were made. The Kaiser Darren fiberglass sports car, only 435 were made. He seemed to have an affinity for being involved with dismal, low production failures, but an amazing character. I spent a week with him. I don't drink, but I tried to have some drinks with him just to talk him into selling me the rights. He decided after doing the Kaiser Darren fiberglass sports car, which was really innovative, the doors slid forward into the body, I'll make the bike out of fiberglass. But it took him till 1959 to find a company that could make that big of a form in fiberglass, and they were in Grand Haven, Michigan, and they were making vibrating fiberglass couches that were supposed to make you lose weight and have therapeutic health benefits. So they went into production December 1959, and then in January 1960, a month later, Reader's Digest had an article elaborating on medical quackery devices that prominently featured the couch as worthless, and it spelled the end of the bike. By February, 3 months later, they were all done, only 522 made. Fragile and easily breakable, not to mention expensive, very few remained. So like I said, I made 180 more of them and added them to the 28 that were known in the world. I was going to bring one today, but I didn't dare bring it. I didn't dare jamming it into a truck, bouncing on the roads and potholes of New England. So anyhow, well, These bikes are radical rolling sculptures, and they truly are rideable fine art. Now, what I tell people with regards to all aspects of collecting, and particularly bicycles, is buy things because you like them, not because you think they will make you wealthy. Then if they don't go up in value, at least you like what you're stuck with. To which I might add, when is the last time you rode your Picasso to the park? I think that's about it. I do run 3 giant bicycle shows and swap meets a year in Connecticut. An annual Spring Has Sprung bicycle show, an annual Summer Better Than Others summertime bike show, and an annual Give Thanks for Bicycles Thanksgiving bike show. On everyone's table is that placemat, so to speak, of the original sales poster. There's also a little business card that's yellow and black for my car club. I'm president of a hot rod car collecting club, and Suki's husband John is in the club. Anyway, that card, I put one on everyone's place. That card has my email address, coololdbikes@gmail.com, and my toll-free number, 800-336-BIKE. So if you missed something I said or want to know more about it, you can call me or email me. If you email me, I'm very happy to send you this 15-page spiel that I just gave to you by email. Suki was going to print them out for everybody, but at 15 pages times 150 people, I understand why that didn't happen. But you'll have my card, and everyone is welcome to take home those flyers of the rarest bike ever made. One does hold the world's record for post-war bicycle at auction at $19,750. There's Mr. Bowden when he presented the composition one. And those are 3 that I made in a kind of patriotic motif, red, white, and blue. I'm kind of on the patriotic side of the tracks because my birthday is next Thursday, the 4th of July.
What are the similarities between these bikes and the modern or differences of the modern bicycles of today?
These bikes that I brought today are all coaster brake bikes. Around the 1940s, Bendix company started making a 2-speed hub with a lever, okay? And they also made a coaster brake that you back-pedaled once and it shifted gears and went into a high gear, and back-pedaled again and it went back to the low gear, but it was still like that. The modern bikes, they started making bicycles with like six gears in the back, and then a 7-speed sprocket in the back with 3 in the front, so you'd have an 18-speed bike. And well, before that, there were 10-speed bikes, racing bikes, road bikes. And then they started making them like 12-speed, 18-speed, 21-speed, 24-speed, 27-speed, and now now they have them with 30 speeds, and it's a little bit of overkill. Okay, thank you so much for coming. Thanks to the sponsors and Suki.